Howdy ho, you handsome hunk. Grab a snack and gain some chunk. If your day is great or really sunk, we hope to help you shake the funk. So if you're good to hear some junk, buckle up, it's the Junk Monk Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Junk Monk Podcast. I'm your host Kandyce Sloan, who you know from Instagram at Hardens and Hardhats.
And I'm Noah, your co-host, who is freaking out.
If this is your first time listening, let us fill you in. We are watching and reviewing every episode of the USA hit TV show Monk right here each week.
We're going to do so while eating a little bit of junk. So
we'll get into the junk in a few minutes. Yeah. But you must know, I have seen every episode of Monk. I'm a huge fan. Started watching in 2007, and for the most part, watched it as it aired.
I've seen season 1 and those we've done on the show, and a few scattered here and there in different seasons.
So, if you're ready to start the show, are you ready to start this show?
I am. Okay, this is... Candice, could you explain to them what we're doing today?
Okay, so basically, we have one of the top most credited writers on the TV show Monk. We are about to interview him coming up, and we actually are recording this before we've done the interview. Mm-hmm. So you're getting some nervous little jitters.
Yes, very. Mm-hmm.
But we're ready to have some fun. We're excited.
Yeah.
We've got our questions. We've got all the things. We've got our junk. I think we're prepared.
We are.
We're gonna do a little interview with Mr. Conrad. Like I said, one of the writers on Monk. He has 43 writing credits. He also co-executive produced the last 2 seasons of Monk.
Wow.
And he, of course, is a writer. He writes mystery novels. And we will talk to him some more about that coming up in just a few moments. So, like I said, we're going to do a little interview. We're going to have a fun lightning round at the end. And we're really excited.
We are very excited.
So, is there anything we left out?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think we're good. And so if you guys are ready, enjoy this interview with Conrad. So did you happen to bring any junk food or snack?
I did. This is rice crisps. So
awesome.
Okay.
Okay.
What we have during cocktail hour, because we don't have a lot of junk food around the house, but we tend to eat crap when we do our cocktail hour. So.
Gotcha. Oh, that's cool. Okay. So I have some kettle corn.
Oh.
And I have pecans.
Some sugar pecans.
Junk food at all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm supposed to be on a diet, but the podcast always gives me a little reason to indulge. So that's always nice. So, our first question to start off is, we did do some research and we saw that you do have a new book. So yes. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. It's called The Fixer's Daughter.
Oh.
And it is, it's out now. You can get it on Amazon. Either it's a paperback or as a Kindle. It is my 20th book. I did 4 books in the Monk series and other mystery books. And this one is my favorite. And it talks about it takes place in Austin, Texas. And it's about a old school Texas fixer who's a politician, sort of a disgraced politician, but who can kind of get you out of trouble if you get into trouble. And he's kind of pitted against his daughter, who's this idealistic reporter. And they wind up dealing with the same murder. He's trying to keep it low key and out of the public headlines. And she's, as an investigative reporter, is trying to solve it. And it's gotten great reviews on Amazon and on Goodreads, and we're really excited about it.
That's awesome. Okay, so I actually read the sample on Amazon, and I was pretty upset when it cut me off. So I was already interested in the character Callie, right? Is her name,
right?
And where her story was headed. I think she had she was going to the paper to get a job, and then the next chapter was she'd met her brother. And they started talking about their father, and then it cut me off. And so I was like, okay.
Well, it's on sale this week for $2.99 for a Kindle edition.
Oh, wow. Okay, perfect.
So that's good to know. And I mean, you there are questions you must have already, like, why is her brother named State?
That was interesting. Yes,
Yeah.
Kelly and State.
Her brother was actually named States' Rights. When he was young, his father was into politics, and this was his statement. So he named his son States' Rights. And I actually have a friend, an older friend, whose name is States' Rights. And everyone calls him State, from an old Texas family.
Yes.
Wow.
Oh, and also we're in Texas.
We are in Texas.
Oh, there you
So
go.
as soon as you started talking about Austin, Travis County, which we're not there, we're Dallas, Fort Worth.
Oh, okay.
But I knew what you were talking about. So I was like, oh, this is interesting. Love that.
So this is our second question. As a mystery writer, you must be used to coming up with crimes and clues. But when writing an episode of Monk, did you actually start with the mystery or a Monk adventure, or what did you start with when writing?
We usually started with the twist. Andy, our head writer, would call it, his little pearls, and he didn't want to waste any of them. And when you came up with a twist, then you would often build a mystery around it. There was occasionally when we would come up with a situation, like when Monk went to prison. Someone thought, oh, this will be a fun idea, Monk getting sent to prison. Would he go there undercover? Would he go there being convicted of a crime? These were all things that we had to figure out along the way. And so we kind of came up with that general concept, but then almost immediately after, we had to come up with the crime. So in the Monk episodes, because the crimes are kind of twisty, whether it's a body on the minute hand of a clock, or other improbable things, they always come very early.
Wow.
Yeah, that makes sense. It does seem to make sense to write the twist and then kind of work from there, instead of, okay, let's start with the story, and then once you get there, like, wait, how are we going to make this interesting?
Yeah, and one thing that we don't like are whodunits. We don't like, it could be A, B, C, D, E, and he was on the train at that time. Blah, blah, blah. So it has to be suspect E. To us, that's really boring. Sort of like picking a name out of a hat. You give everyone else a little alibi as you go along, and the person without an alibi, is the bad person. And I just don't see the interest in that. A lot of Monks were why done it. Why did the person with the there was an episode, and I don't know if you have reached it yet, about with Snoop Dogg.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
That was a great episode.
I love that.
And I have written a lot of books with twists in them, and some of them are like aimed at children. They're sort of like the Encyclopedia Brown type of books. And so I, especially in the early days, would come into work and give people a little riddle, and one of which involved daylight savings times, in which someone sets a bomb and winds up killing his best friend, or someone that he was dependent upon for his earnings, like someone indispensable. And why? And the solution was that he had set the bomb to go off at a certain time, and that was, he didn't take into account daylight savings time. And so I brought that into the room, and then we walked about, okay, what kind of, it would probably be a bomb set on analog clock, like on an old time clock, and where would the bomb be set, and we thought, well, let's put it in a limousine. And then at some point, we had a lot of cards on the board. We had a lot of cork boards around the office, and you would put up different ideas, and one of which was Monk getting involved in the music business, and like with rappers, and that would be funny. So that was already on the board, and then we came up with someone being killed in the limousine, at the wrong time, and so we kind of took that, and we combined that, and so we had a lot of ideas, some of which are still on that board somewhere, never used.
That's so interesting. Okay, so since we're on that topic, were there any mysteries or ideas that you can remember that never made it into the script?
We were a very efficient team. And I've worked on other shows, and maybe one out of every three scripts you wrote, or maybe one out of every two scripts you wrote got actually picked up and filmed. A lot of them were just, as we call, burned. They were never done. Someone would have an objection to them. And very early on, the network, you would say, started to trust us, that we knew what we were doing. And, these little gems, these little pearls that Andy came up with, he was very protective, and he didn't want any of them to go to waste. There was one that did go to waste, and it was Monk on a cruise ship. And so you had one of the crew members. We wrote the script like 3 times because we tried to get a cruise line to let us film on board. And our initial bad guy was the captain. And they said, no, you can't have the captain. We won't let you use Carnival Cruise Lines and have the captain be a murderer. That's not going to work. And then we said, okay, how about, the onboard magician? We could do something with him. He would know how to do this kind of murder. And they said, well, can't you have it happen when they're off, like on a day trip in Puerto Vallarta, and, they get killed there? And I said, no, that's a Puerto Vallarta mystery. That's not a cruise ship mystery.
Exactly.
The cruise ship mystery is that it happens in that confined space of the cruise ship, and you have to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
So long story short-ish is that we couldn't get a cruise line to cooperate with us. And so that was the one episode that we never did. And that one, I took the plot of that and made it into a Monk novel.
Oh, which novel was that?
Mr. Monk Gets on Board. It's something like that.
Okay.
It has a nautical theme to it. Yeah, Mr. Monk Gets on Board. I just saw it on my shelf.
I'll have to read it.
And yes, and did you change the name of the cruise ship? I mean, the cruise line. Did you use a fictitious
Well,
line?
because of the necessity, I wanted it to be a small kind of tattered cruise line because of and you wind up changing a lot of things because of necessity, because, why would this person do this? Okay, let's say it's all about solving problems. And there were some problems in how the cruise ship functioned that I wanted to make it a small cruise ship, maybe 500 passengers. And I didn't want to make it top of the line. I think there was a day or so in the story where the cruise ship passengers can't use their cell phones. And now using cell phones on a cruise ship is something that's done all the time. But I wanted it to fit those certain requirements. So I made it a small ship.
Gotcha.
Other than that, and with a made-up cruise name.
Mm-hmm, right. Okay, so we know that the writer's room was in New Jersey,
right?
And then the show filmed in LA. So what was the relationship like back and forth from the set? Like if somebody wanted to change something, like one of your scripts, or
we
pitch
would
a new
always
idea?
have a writer who would be out there. Often in the beginning of the writing season, everyone would be in the room. There's usually 5 of us, maybe sometimes 6. And we'd all be in the room. And then at some point, someone would be sent out to LA, usually someone who was based in LA. And so he would go back to LA and he would be our point man on the set. And he can make tiny changes by himself, but anything that really affected a good joke or affected a setup or affected a scene, he would call it in and we would discuss it. So there would be someone on the set. And the great thing about, I wound up being co-executive producer on the show, which in the real world has a lot of responsibilities. You have to deal with casting, you have to deal with things on the set. You have to deal with a lot of things behind the camera, which I don't enjoy. Since we were 3,000 miles away, we tended not to have to do that. We would get involved with casting. But like the day-to-day grind of, oh, they're shooting this today on the set, oh, they're doing that, what are we, we didn't have to deal with that at all. So we could spend all of our time working on the scripts. At a certain point during season 1 or season 2, Andy yelled at them enough that they decided they just would leave us alone and count on us to turn in scripts that everyone would like, which is what happened for, 8 years. So that was great.
Right. So speaking of that as well, did you ever get to be one of those people that went to see your script be filmed?
Yes, saw a couple of my scripts filmed. And this is part of my problem with being on the set, is that you go to the set, and we did Mr. Monk and the Paperboy,
Great
where
episode.
the
Great
paper
episode.
boy is murdered because he keeps trying to deliver a paper. And this is when we first meet his upstairs neighbor, Kevin Dorfman.
Yeah.
Is during that was during that thing. And so in this script, it has, it's 5 a.m. The streets are deserted. A newspaper boy is trying to deliver a paper, and I get to the script, and it's broad daylight because they didn't consider it a night shoot. They have hired cars to go back and forth on the street. They hired actors, extras to walk along the street during this whole thing. And, their director, sir, I don't think this is going to work. It says, 5 a.m. It says streets deserted, because they get into a fight. He keeps trying to deliver the paper, and the guy attacks him. And, to have 20 witnesses and 15 cars pass by is not going to work. And he said, look, we've already hired everybody. This is what we're going to shoot, and we'll work it out somehow. And we wound up refilming the entire thing a month or two later.
It sounds like it needed to be done. So.
Yeah. And what had happened was, for the first 5 or 6 seasons, we used to go to San Francisco for like 10 days and film things that actually looked like San Francisco. And no one was happy with that scene, that daytime scene with the paperboy. So we redid that on location at night, and it worked a lot better.
Nice.
For the last season or two of Monk, we didn't go to San Francisco at all, but they had built on the soundstage, outdoor soundstage, they had built a big green screen circle. It was a green, the green screens?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it was built in a circle so that you could walk across a street and turn any direction, and you would all be green screen. And there are a couple of shots with like Monk standing in the middle of a San Francisco street and turning this way and that way and wondering where he's going. Those were all filmed in the backlot in LA with the expensive green screen, which, it may have cost a couple $100,000, but it was not nearly as expensive as moving the whole cast and crew to San Francisco for 10 days.
That makes sense. That sounds impressive. Like a 360 view instead of just like a screen. That's very cool.
Yeah.
So how, if ever, did you actually watch the episodes as they aired, or?
Well, we watched them very, very often. There are a lot of different versions of an episode. You'll have the first cut that comes in, and they're usually too long, especially if you get a good guest star who Tony knows, because then they'll get into messing with each other, and all of a sudden the scene is 3 minutes longer than it needs to be. John Turturro was that way. Stanley Tucci was that way. They would improvise and do things with each other, and all of a sudden you had to cut 3 minutes worth of screen time because you hadn't counted on that. So the first cut that comes back is the director's cut. And we all look at that and, figure, okay, what needs changing, what needs cutting. And then there's the producer's cut, the writer's room cut. It goes through 3 or 4 at least iterations of everyone getting their 2 cents in about what can work here and, what doesn't work. And do we have to bring the actors back in just to do their voices? So if you do a cutaway, if you need to change a line, you won't focus on Tony's face, you'll focus on someone else's face, and Tony will loop the line in if we change a line after it's all been filmed. And sometimes you'll take a minute or two out of their day and have them refilm something from a previous episode. So it's a long process. When it finally gets on the air, you wind up seeing it, sitting down with your family and seeing it. And but I have not seen an episode of Monk since it originally aired.
Wow.
I've never gone back because you spend so much time with it. And then sometimes you will forget things. You came up with so many different names for a bad guy, or, that you will forget what the final episode looked like. And one example of this is when we wrote Mr. Monk Goes to Jail, the one I was mentioning earlier. We didn't like the twist. We didn't like the ending. It was kind of convoluted. It was weird. And so after the script came in, and we had a guest writer come in and write it. A wonderful woman who used to work on Murder, She Wrote, and she came in and she wrote a script for us, and it was fine. And then we decided, no, we need a better twist, and we completely rewrote it. So I think when she sat down and watched it with her family, she didn't know who the bad guy was, because it wasn't at all the script that she had turned in.
Wow.
So it's always until you actually show it on a screen, you never quite know exactly how it's going to wind up.
Right.
That's awesome. So as the show was airing and gaining popularity, did you have actors reaching out who wanted to be on the show?
Yes, we used an awful lot of them. Since it was a very clean show, and it was also a kind of a slow show in which you really respected the actors. If you watch a Monk episode, there are never more than maybe 20 scenes in the entire show. We don't cut back and forth between things. We don't have 1 minute scenes and then a 30-second scene and then a 3-minute scene.
That's true.
So the scenes kind of give the actors room to breathe. The actors themselves will watch episodes with their families, and so they know it's a clean show that their 8-year-old can watch. And so we had a lot of actors volunteer, and then, or when we asked them to do it, they would say yes because they hadn't watched the show with their families.
That's awesome. So were there any roles that were specifically written for a guest star? Like you were like, OMG, this would fit so well for them.
Who? Excuse me?
Or were there any roles that were specifically written for a guest star?
Or was it always like an afterthought?
No, not really, because we would write, no one could commit that far in advance.
Right.
That's part of the reason we had so few episodes with Monk's brother. We wanted to have many more episodes with him, but John Turturro just couldn't commit that all. I think he did 3, maybe 4, maybe 3 episodes with us, but he really couldn't commit. And so we couldn't sit down and write a script for him for Monk's brother. You can't have someone substitute that, and then not have him commit. So Jason Alexander was sort of like a last-minute replacement. We had originally written the role of Mr. Monk and the Other Detective, which Jason Alexander did and did a great job. He may have gotten nominated for an Emmy for that. I'm not sure. I can't quite remember. But that was written from the guy from American Pie, the young guy, Jason or something. Or
Jason Biggs?
Yes. He was sort of our original idea, that he was sort of like living with his mother and was kind of dysfunctional and preening, and then I think Jason Alexander came to us and said, I'd love to do a Monk. He met someone at a party, one of our people at a party, and said, I would love to do a Monk episode. And so we took that character and made it into this loser, slovenly, Jason Alexander role. And of course, he did magic with it. It was terrific.
I love that episode.
That's good.
Yeah, that's one that I wrote, and that's probably my favorite.
Really? Oh, wow. Okay. So we assume that Adrian Monk was the most fun character to write for. You can correct us if we're wrong, but other than Monk, who is your favorite character to write for out of the main, cast?
Well, Disher, of course, was always, Lieutenant Disher is always fun, because as most of the people who worked in the room were comedy writers. I was the only real mystery writer, at least in the very beginning. And so they all had their jokes. They all had their go-to jokes. And so a lot of jokes are stupid jokes, or jokes that a stupid person would say. And we would save those all for Randy. And it's just because we had the jokes around and we thought they were funny. And but going back to your, so I liked writing for Randy, and of course we wrote completely different for Sharona and for Natalie.
Mhm.
We had one script left over after Biddy left, and we kind of changed the names a bit and made it an episode. It may have been Big Reward, but I'm not sure which episode it was. But it was sort of written in Sharona's voice, where she would kind of talk back to him, and
Yeah, Sharona sounds.
it was not doing well. And we realized that she had to be a different character. We just couldn't take Sharona's personality and lump it onto Taylor Howard. We had to make it more her. And, you know, so we don't have this blousy New Jersey woman who's going to talk back to him. She was this petite, you know, younger actress. And so we decided that she had to be the nicest person in the world. And that's the only way it was going to work. So whereas Sharona would challenge Monk and talk back to him, Natalie would, you know, do everything she could to help him out. And that was the way that the actress herself could work with the role. If we had made her a harder kind of character, it wouldn't have worked.
Right. She definitely mellows out, you know, the first like 3 episodes, you can see her being like, I need this, I need that. And then she mellows out. And so
that was when we discovered that we had to make her different.
Right. Exactly.
One thing we did change, and it wasn't for an actor. There was an episode we did in which, and we went through so many iterations, but this one was someone like a Bruce Lee character is dead.
Mm-hmm. The Cobra versus the Cobra?
Yeah, I think that was the one. Mm-hmm. And so in that one, we wanted someone who had been buried in the San Francisco area, and someone famous. And so the first person we tried, and she wasn't buried in San Francisco, was Audrey Hepburn. We wanted them to exhume Audrey Hepburn's body during and see why she couldn't have been the killer. And we thought that using someone as wonderful and as chic as her, and of course her estate would not allow that. But every comedian in the room, as soon as we mentioned exhuming Audrey Hepburn, they all had a great line for Disher, which was, "She still has those cheekbones."
Yep.
And so we went through several iterations. Then we approached Bruce Lee's estate, and they talked to us for a while, and then they turned us down. So we made it a fictional martial arts character.
Right. Yeah. Which, I mean, I got Bruce Lee vibes from it, but I
appreciated it. We just changed the names.
Right. Yeah.
So other than a character being your favorite to write for, was there a character that was more challenging to write for?
I mean, the 4 main characters were really terrific. We knew all their voices. You would have some of the the relationship between Howard Crenshaw and Monk was challenging in that Monk hated him so much. And so coming up with situations in which they would play off of each other might have been a little demanding, but often characters like the upstairs neighbor came out of the necessity of the episode. We wanted the most boring person in the world, and we needed him for the demands of the plot. The plot was that he kept going on to Monk about all the addresses he used to live at. I lived at 65 Winter Street, and then when we were 10, I moved to 78 Washington Avenue, but that was only for a short time. And then, so as he keeps saying this, and Monk keeps zoning out, those numbers turned out to be the lottery numbers, the lotto numbers, and he wins the lottery. So that whole character, who did 4 or 5 episodes for us, came out of the necessity of one plot, and that we had to have a character who comes into the monk's world and is the most boring person alive. And that was his personality.
Right, I love that. And those are some of my favorite clues where they're right in your face and you're almost like, oh my gosh, just get over with it. And then at the end, that was so important. I love those clues. I love those. Yeah. Okay, so the next question has a little bit of a spoiler, but we had a few listeners ask about it. So if anybody's listening and that hasn't seen the end of the show, just be warned. But I did tell Noah this because I was going to ask the question, but that Natalie does not end up with any of the 3 leading men. Now, I did not tell him who the men end up with, so I left that a surprise for him. Mm-hmm. But I did say that Natalie doesn't end up with any of the leading men. So what was the reason or discussion behind that decision?
I don't think any of them were really worthy of her, you know?
Agreed.
She always seemed to be, to us, to be someone who could take care of herself, who, didn't really, need that. I think anything we did to her character would have seemed forced. Stottlemyre had been through, I think, his first wife and a divorce and a second engagement, and she was convicted of murder, and then his third one. So we needed some sort of settlement there. Sharona and I don't want to give away any spoilers here, but anyway, so some characters seem to have needed to get together, and I don't think her character really needed it.
Right. That makes sense.
Okay, so our last question before we head into our lightning round is...
I'm scared of this lightning round.
It's tame. It's okay.
Okay.
What do you miss most about being a part of Monk?
I think the writer's room. I worked with some of the same writers on 3 different shows. One of which is The Good Cop, which is still on Netflix. We did 1 season of The Good Cop with with Josh Groban and the actor from Who's the Boss?
Tony Danza.
Tony will kill me. And Tony Danza. We did 1 season of that with some of the same writers, and then we did another show for ABC that never got on the air with some of the same writers. So the writer's room is what I really miss. Popping in there every day, and you wind up, you start just for the first half hour just talking about your day, telling jokes, things you read in the newspaper, and then it morphs into this kind of very intense, and we always had lunch brought in because you didn't want to interrupt the flow. And Ray Romano, who was a TV actor from years ago.
I love Ray Romano.
His production company is called Where's Lunch, which is the cry of every writer's room as it's like 12:30 or 1 o'clock and they're all starving and lunch hasn't yet been delivered. So, you work through lunch, it becomes a very intense process. And then if you're lucky, you do some great stuff.
That sounds like a lot of fun. That I would love to be in a writer's room one day just to listen to all the ideas bouncing around. That sounds really fun.
And free food.
And lunch. So I think next is our lightning round.
It is.
All right, so the listeners are used to these segments, so they know what all the segments are about. So we're just going to transition quickly through each one, and we're just going to ask you one question that pertains to each one.
You need a quick answer or something? You need a quick answer?
Well, we don't want to rush you. If you would like to elaborate, that's fine with us. We're just sticking to our one question, and then feel free, obviously, As long as you like to talk, we'd love to have you. So it's quick for us, but it doesn't have to necessarily be quick for you.
Yeah.
So,
I got it.
okay. All right. So ready?
Yep. Here's what happened.
Okay. This segment is all about the summation. So what is your favorite Monk summation?
I think where Monk goes to the circus and there is the clown in the background. And we always like to have something different during the summation. And there was one that was totally silent, etc. But the one with the irritating clown in the background, I think, has to be my favorite.
Yep. I love
That was hilarious.
I love that episode. And I actually did, as one of our other bonus episodes, Noah was at school, so I partnered with someone else to do it. But we had an entire 3-hour conversation about all of the summations and realized, you know, as going through the entire series, there's so many times you guys were able to just switch it up just a little bit and make each summation just its own like character. It's so great. So I love that you said that one though. I love that clown who's like wonk with the shoe. I love that so much. So
Okay, so next I usually ask what we liked about this episode in a very smooth transition way, but I'll ask, what episode are you most proud of?
I would have to say Mr. Monk and the Other Detective. We had Jason Alexander, who did a great job. We had the guest star who did not play the bad guy. You know, Jason's role was not the villain, which was a big switch up for us. So yeah, that's the one I'm most proud of.
And then I think we're on Mr. Monk Joins a Cult is what we recorded last night, and we realized that Howie Mandel, which arguably he could be a bad guy, right? Because he's kind of conning people, but that he wasn't the villain either.
Oh, I had forgotten that.
No, well, no, not to call you out, but we just discovered that last night. We were like, because I think he pointed out like that's one of my favorite villains, and I was like, wait, was he the villain in that episode? So yeah, but Jason Alexander as well. That was very unique on that part. So next would be dislikes. So
the one that never really came together to me, and I could bear when it finally came on the air. I had a hard time watching it. Was Mr. Monk Goes to the Dentist? It never quite gelled.
That one, we don't hate it. It's just Kandyce doesn't like the dentist.
I recently got my wisdom teeth taken out like 2 weeks ago. So that was like, it was Monk superphobia. And then I was going to get my teeth out. So I was like, no, but yes.
We actually wound up refilming a bit of that episode, but it never really, in my mind, never really came together.
Yeah, I think that was because at the end of each season we rate each episode, right? So then at the end of the season, we rank all of them in order from what we had rated them throughout the season. And I believe that was our least favorite episode in that season. So that's interesting that you mentioned that.
Agree with us.
Yeah. Okay, so next one is
He's the Guy. Okay, so this segment is all about actors who appear in the episode. So the question is, who is the most memorable guest star in your opinion?
Well, that's the most memorable guest star. Sarah Silverman.
We love Sarah Silverman.
Man. I was on the set with her when she was doing one of the episodes, and she was a delight to work with, and she was very modest and had a lot of great ideas and knew what we were getting into. So I think she was in maybe 2 episodes, maybe more, but we really enjoyed her.
She's awesome. That was the season opener for this season 6 that we're on now, and I gave it a perfect 10.
Yeah.
So I love she does the crazy so well, so crazier than Monk.
Yeah. Usually we rate each episode on how crazy Monk was, but because she was so crazy, we did it on her.
You know?
And of course, then she goes back to F. Murray Abraham. Is that the one where she?
Yeah.
Yes. When we were sitting around the room, okay, what name can we use that would be funny? Just saying the name is funny. And F. Murray Abraham came to mind.
I think he's a hunk. Okay, the next one.
Junk time. Welcome back to my favorite time of the show, where we eat our junk, and Kandyce usually asks me a question.
Okay.
Today, she's going to be asking you a question.
That's different.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's even better.
First, what is your go-to junk food? I know you said you don't like to eat junk, but
I'm not really into sweets. So, like salty things like these Rice Crisps,
Mhm.
you know, are fine. I can't think of any. My favorite dessert is pineapple upside down cake.
Oh,
That's
really?
not a junk food. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that
Well, I
goes
mean,
back to childhood.
oh, that's nice. Yeah, we've talked about recently how we like to cook recipes together and all kinds of stuff. So
Hmm.
we've had all different variations of. We had Syrian donuts last week. We've
Oh,
had, I mean, like all different Taco Bell.
Yeah.
Just anything we can get our hands on before we start the show. That's just what we grab and then start recording.
Yeah, one week we'll have some fancy entree and another we'll have potato chips.
Gatorade or something
Gatorade,
random.
yeah.
Just whatever we can get our hands on. So we actually, for this junk time, we asked the listeners out there to submit questions, and they had
Okay.
some really good ones. So thank you, listeners, for that. Okay, this question is from Fantasia, and she had a lot to say about Trudy. So again, if you no spoilers, if you could try to answer it this way, but she wants to know, did you end Trudy's storyline the way that it was intended? And also kind of how far in advance did you know how her story was going to end?
No, we had no plans for Trudy except that every season or so we would get a little step closer. And there were a lot of what we call stutter steps, a lot of steps there where it really didn't, once a season you would deal with the Trudy thing, but it wouldn't really advance the investigation. And that was just because we were kind of treading water.
Mm-hmm.
We knew the series was going to end towards the end of season 6, going into season 7. We all think, because everyone's contract was up around the same time, and USA was getting into sort of like younger programming, like Suits and their kind of blue sky programming. And so we all figured that we were ready to let it go after 8 seasons. And so starting in like season 7, we started to tie things up a bit. We came up with the end of Dorfman. We, kind of tied together Stottlemeyer's thing with his fiance. And we started thinking a lot about the ending. And we watched a lot of final episodes. We watched, the final episode of MASH, The Fugitive, all various, to see what would make a good final episode. And of course, it had to revolve around Trudy. And so
you really didn't know until, I mean, you had to sit down.
we were putting together the elements. We would take like a half hour or an hour every week or so and kind of like fill in elements of what we thought would make a good ending to the series. But there is one prop that Monk used for several Christmas episodes, et cetera. And one day someone said, can we make that part of Trudy's solution? Can we make that part of Trudy's story? And that was just serendipitous. That was just lucky that this one thing that had been there all along, from the very beginning, wound up being a central part. And you must know what I'm talking about. That wound up being a cornerstone of the solution. But no, we didn't. When it came to like the actual murderer and the actual last episode and how it all winds up, we didn't know that until maybe a month or so before.
Wow.
The
Well,
end.
I'm impressed. Knowing that. So, but I mean, later, once we get to the end for him, we'll replay this for him and then he'll be like, okay, I get what's going on. I get what he's talking about. So, but thank you for answering it that way. Plot holes.
Uh-oh.
This is my favorite part of the show where we get to dissect it just a little bit.
So we wanted to ask you, what is the probably most implausible crime?
Well, my favorite crime, and this was one thought up by Andy Breckman's brother, David Breckman, who's a writer in LA and terrific writer and guy, was the body on the minute hand. And when Monk goes back to school, that's just, Oh, and the astronaut who kills his girlfriend with a garage door opener. Those are, and that was also, I think, a David Breckman idea, and things that are just so, completely out there that they just make you laugh.
Right. So would that be this kind of the same answer as what your favorite clue might be?
I like elegant clues. There was one, I think it might have been the next to the last episode, in which there's this rhyme, and that someone says or someone writes down, whatever, and Monk figures out that it's an address, that these are numbers.
I actually don't remember that, but.
And so, and at one point, Natalie gets on a board and writes out the words, like something, heaven, whatever, and Monk realizes, no, that's, if you say it, that's 7. That's, and so elegant clues like that, where someone makes, girls can eat 15 pizzas is another example of one in which the victim has memorized a license plate number, and he memorizes it as a mnemonic device. So when he says girls can eat 15 pizzas, and they kind of play around with that, it turns out to be a license plate number.
I love that clue too. That's another really in-your-face clue that by now watching it so many times I do remember, but I remember thinking after it's said and done, like, of course that's a license plate. Like, duh, everybody, remembers license plates now. And so it's like, I just think that's really great. The girls can't eat 15 pizzas, how they don't put it together, but it's like, well, we didn't put it together either.
Yeah.
So. You ready for this one? How crazy was Monk this episode?
Okay, so we always make a list of crazy stuff that Monk did in the episode. So what is the craziest Monk moment that you can recall writing?
I think when he obviously was fixating on something, but when he wound up putting water in the garbage. Do you remember that one?
Yeah. He has bags of water. They're like, what's in here? And he's like, it's water. Yeah. You throw away your water?
Yeah. He wanted it all to be sanitary. So I think that was my favorite crazy moment.
Yeah. And they put it in Sector 9 for him.
Exactly.
Rate this episode. Unfortunately, this is our last segment where we sum up the show and we give our ratings.
So our last question for you is, what are some final thoughts of all the Monk fans that have stuck with the show all these years, and for all the new viewers that still continue to find the show?
I'm amazed that the show has remained, as I've worked on several shows, and none of them I think have had that kind of staying power. And I think everyone just loves what Tony Shalhoub did with the role, and having someone who was that damaged and yet funny, that you can sympathize with and laugh with and laugh at, is just really personal to a lot of people, and I think that's made it successful. Rather than any other detective, Tony brought a real humanity to that, and I don't know of any other actor who could have done it.
Yeah, great answer. Tony is great, and you have been great as well.
Well, thank you.
So I think that's it. Thank you so much for joining us today. Is there anything else that anybody? It's been an honor, a privilege.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
And everyone needs to go right now and order Hi's new book, The Fixer's Daughter. It is on Amazon. And where can people find you and more of your books and more about you?
There's hiconrad.com, and that's a good way to find me. There's also, I think, Instagram. My husband, who's used to be an ad executive, deals with all these things. But yeah, you can Google Hi Conrad, or go to Hi Conrad on Amazon, or go to hiconrad.com, and you'll find out more.
All right, guys.
But
so
on hiconrad.com, there are also these little mini mysteries, like 3 or 4 minutes to read, and have the solution right there. And some of them might even be plus that we reused on Monk, because I've been writing these books forever.
Oh, wow. That's okay. Exciting. Yeah. So,
All right, guys. So head out there and get your copy from Amazon, wherever you can find The Fixer's Daughter.
and highconrad.com.
Is in
Yes.
Perfect. And thank you once again so much. And we hope to talk to you soon, maybe some day in the future. But
Absolutely.
thank you so much. And
This was a lot of fun for me.
thank you guys. And everyone stay safe.
because it's a jungle out there.
All right. Thank you so much. Hi.
Sure. Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Bye. Hey guys, thanks for listening to the Junk Monk podcast. We'd love to hear from you, so please give us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, follow us at Junk Monk Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.
If you want to know more about Kandyce, she's at Hardens and Hardhats on Instagram. And if you want to know more about me, Noah L., subscribe to my vlog, Noah Hernandez, on YouTube. Also, you can leave us a voicemail at 323-366-0477 with your questions, comments, or just to show us some love.
Don't forget to catch up on Monk with Amazon Prime Video, and of course, subscribe to our show.
You'll thank me later.